I mean, imagine if they have millions of claims and they're just paying to detach and reset a baseboard and one coat of paint. Multiply that, you're talking just probably, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 100, 200 bucks on each estimate, but you multiply that by I don't know how many estimates, and it's a lot more normally, but that's a lot of money saved. Yeah, I can't do anything if I don't have an estimate. Like that's my negotiating tool. They have an estimate that they present to you that it says it's going to cost $10,000. You have an estimate you present to them that shows factual evidence as to why it's going to cost $20,000. The initial payout was like $197,000, and he said that he settled the claim for $1.3 million.
Hi everybody, Jose Luis Morales here. Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. Today we have a very special guest. We have Vince Perri with Elite Resolutions, also known as the commercial claims advocate on social media and online. And he is a public adjuster. He worked for a public adjusting firm. And today he is going to teach us how their company can help you fight your insurance company for a higher claim. Or even if you have a denial, how can they help you? Is it a valid denial? So basically, to make it really simple, sometimes unfortunate things happen, like a house burns down, an insurance company only wants to pay you X amount of dollars, but that X amount of dollars is a very minimal account. They will use whatever loophole they can find to pay the least amount of money. And their company represents homeowners or the policyholder to basically help you get the highest claim possible. So I'm excited about this interview. Welcome to the show, Vince. How are you?
I'm good, Jose. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Of course. So for our viewers that don't know who Vince Perri is, who is Vince Perri, and then how did you get involved in this world of public adjusting?
So Vince Perri is a licensed public adjuster. I've been a licensed public insurance adjuster now for 15 years. And hold on a second. Sorry about that. I started off working for State Farm. I actually worked for State Farm 15 years ago. I worked there for a couple of years doing auto claims. I was an insurance adjuster. And then from there, I just I didn't feel like I was doing any justice, right? Because we were very limited as to what we could pay. We'd always get questioned as to when we agreed to pay certain things. And I wasn't really cool with it. And I had already known about public adjusting before working for State Farm. I just found that it would be advantageous to work on the other side for a couple of years, which ultimately it was. And then I decided to make the leap. In 2008, I decided to go and I said, hey, you know what? Let me go ahead and do this public adjusting thing. And basically, it's exactly what we do, right? Is we go in and we could help a homeowner either from the beginning, and it's very advantageous to have somebody on your side from the beginning, because if you don't document and sort of prepare the claim correctly the way the insurance company wants it, it's going to make your life a lot harder. So for example, as soon as we come in, we're going to document, we're going to photograph, and we're going to gather any kind of evidence that's going to help our case, because the insurance company, they're the ones they're holding the bag, right? They're holding the money. And like you, Jose, I'm sure, or like me, we're not just going to give away money. We need to see some proof, some evidence. That's all. I mean, I don't think the insurance company is the bad guys. They just need proof. They need evidence. And if you just go ahead and call the insurance company and say, hey, I've got this damage, and they go in there and they say, well, it's pretty odd. It looks like it's been happening for a long time, but you know that it just happened last week. Well, that's okay, but you have to prove it to them. You can't just say it. You want to prove it. So through photo documentation, through gathering any kind of invoices, receipts, and stuff like that, along with making sure that you mitigate the damages, which means protect your home. A public adjuster is going to go in to make sure that those are all things in your insurance policy that state that this is what you have to do. We already know the list of things that you have to do, and we make sure we abide by all those things, and we present the claim on a silver platter to the insurance company to hopefully ultimately make the insurance claims process much more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the right way of going through that process, and what is maybe like the wrong way of going through that process?
So there's a very important thing in your insurance policy. It's under the conditions sections of the insurance policy, and it's called the duties after loss. That's basically what we do for you. Like number one is document the loss. Number two is make any necessary repairs. Number three is notify the insurance company immediately. Number four is provide a proof of loss. Like They may not be in that exact order, Jose, but it's about a list of 6 or 7 things. You have to notify, in case of a theft, you have to notify the police department immediately. These are things that the insurance company is requiring you to do as soon as a loss occurs. Nobody knows about that.
Mm-mm.
Did you know what a duty? Do you know what a duty? Did you know that that even existed in the insurance policy? No, nobody does.
I don't think I would even know where to start, to be honest. And I think the challenge that I see is this may only happen to people once or twice in their entire life, twice at the most. But it's almost like you guys are handling hundreds of cases, so you guys have the. It's like if you tell me to sell a house, I know how to do that like the back of my hand, as opposed to somebody trying to sell a house for their first time. So it's just the fact that you guys do it so often. So what are some of the things that maybe insurance companies will do to pay the least amount of to try to pay the least amount of money, or what are some of the things cases that you guys have had where you guys have had successful resolution for your client?
So in the 80s, I'm going to tell a little story if that's okay.
Yeah,
In
of
the
course.
in the 80s, there was a lawsuit that occurred against Allstate. You could find this anywhere. It was called Allstate versus McKinsey,
Hmm.
Allstate versus McKinley. And the Allstate had hired a business growth firm, like to help grow their company, to look into it to see how they could go for exponential growth. And what they ended up finding was that their largest expense was claim payouts, and they started to dig deep, and then there was a lawsuit because they ended up finding all kinds of ways that the insurance company figured out to underpay on claims. And it's little things, Jose, like detaching and resetting the baseboard, painting one coat of paint instead of 2 coats of paint, doing a repair on a roof that maybe requires a full replacement. And what happens is people don't know any better, and they end up taking the money, and that's it. They just feel like, oh well, I can't do anything else. And then they'll call the contractor. The contractor comes in and says, no, well, you're missing a lot of money here. It's going to cost you a lot more than what they're paying you. But by doing that, and then also another thing is depreciation, right? So if you have an old home or just an older home and they replace your roof, if that roof is a year old or 5 years old or 10 years old, they're going to depreciate that based on how old it is or the condition of it. And that money normally you can get back, but if you don't go after it later, you may forget about it, or you may not want to deal with it. Or that's another way that they sort of underpay. So by sort of writing low estimates. All their estimates are low. And by holding depreciation, they are able to save millions upon millions. I mean, imagine if they have millions of claims and they're just paying to detach and reset a baseboard and 1 coat of paint. Multiply that, you're talking just probably, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 100, $200 on each estimate, but you multiply that by I don't know how many estimates, and it's a lot more normally, but that's a lot of money saved. And that's what they were able to figure out in this McKinsey versus Allstate, where if we save money here, save money there, delay tactics, right? If you're paying your premium every single month and they have ways of dragging out the claim, well, that's when they continue to make their premium, so that at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, whenever it is that they submit their numbers, well, their numbers are on the positive. And that's another thing that they do that I've noticed for 15 years. After tax season or after the new year, all of a sudden adjusters are calling me to settle claims. It's just like little things that they do, that they pull to just sort of save money here and there, continue to take in the premiums, and ultimately, yeah, save hundreds of millions of dollars.
It is a good tactic for us to get our own estimates as homeowners at all,
Yes.
like
Yes.
before sending it to them. Is that a common practice at all?
Yeah, so we do that as well. We put together what's called an Exsactimate estimate. It's a software that we use to put a line itemized estimate together. I would recommend that if you do not hire a public adjuster and you hire a contractor to say maybe put an estimate together, ask them if they know how to use this software, because they should know. And if they don't, you could just tell them this is what the insurance company sort of prefers. They want to see what it costs for the paint. They want to see what it costs for the texture. They want to see what it costs for the shingle. Whereas if you just hire a normal general contractor, normally they'll put an estimate together, but you know how it is. It'll just be like 6 or 7, 8 line items, and then there's your total. The insurance company wants to see more. Oh, sorry. They want to see more of a breakdown of the actual estimate. So ask the contractor if they know how to do an Exsactimate estimate.
Exsactimate estimate, basically.
Exsactimate. There's other softwares out there, Simsol, and there is Symbility, that all do the same thing. But basically, a real detailed, broken down, line itemized estimate.
And that basically helps the insurance company with the process make sure that nobody's trying to pull a fast one on them, basically, by them
That's
seeing the breakdown.
Yeah, that's my. I can't do anything if I don't have an estimate. Like that's my negotiating tool. They have an estimate that they present to you that it says it's going to cost $10,000. You have an estimate you present to them that shows factual evidence as to why it's going to cost $20,000 or $15,000.
How long do claims take to get resolved?
So I think in California it's 45 days they have to resolve the claim. So keep
What
that
about
in
other
mind.
states?
In Florida, it's 60 days. In Texas, it's 60 days. Those are the only 3 states I could really know off the top of my head. But yes, there is something called the Unfair Claims Practices Acts. Okay, you can Google it, California Unfair Claim Practices Act. So you go and you scroll down to where it says Fair Settlement Practices, and you'll see some of the time limits there, like how long they have to resolve a claim, how they have to provide you with a reason for a denial. They have to quote the policy. If they deny your claim and say, hey, you're not covered, they can't just send you a letter that says, hey, you're not covered. They have to not only explain why you're not covered, they also have to quote the policy, that they also have to quote the language in the policy that states specifically why that claim was denied.
If somebody is denied, is that something that you could potentially help them with to kind of almost look into the reason why it was denied and see if that's a valid um, reason or not? And what would that look
Yeah.
like?
Absolutely. Basically, I'll look at a claim. They'll send me the denial letter. I'll look at the reason for the denial. I'll look for little things like that. Did they quote the policy or not? And then I'll look at the damage. I'll do an inspection on the property and I'll see what their reason was and what I sort of believe really happened. I question the homeowner or the business owner as to exactly what happened. I want your facts of loss. And then I put together a nice fancy letter. I present to the insurance company and I explain to them why they might have wrongfully denied it. And if you could please reconsider reopening this claim and seeing what we can do here.
How much more on average can a policymaker make or not make, but how much more on average? And I don't know if you have this number, are you guys getting on top of what maybe a traditional policyholder would make? And is it worth the extra cost as well too?
It is. It is. So we charge anywhere between 10 and 20%. That's going to be depending on the size of your claim, depending on a lot of different factors. And I will tell you, Jose, it can be at minimum, we're going to get you 50% more. And at maximum, anywhere from 7 to 8 to 900% more. I just saw a guy on Facebook. Actually, it was a pretty wild one. The initial payout was like $197,000, and he said that he settled the claim for $1.3 million. That's a lot,
That's a
but
big
yeah,
difference.
that stuff happens. That stuff happens. That stuff happens a lot.
What claims are too small for your company to take on? Like is there like a certain number that you guys like to see? Is there a certain type of damage that you guys like to see before working with a client?
I wouldn't say it's not too small for us. Sometimes it's too small for the homeowner. If it's a single bathroom, right, where there's maybe not even a shower, it's just, it's just got your toilet, it's got your sink to wash your hands or whatever. It's going to cost you maybe a couple grand, right? Maybe it'll cost you $4,000 or $5,000. If you have a $5,000 deductible, it's not worth it for anybody. If you have a $2,500 deductible, it may not be worth it for you either. Yeah, sure, the couple $1,000s may help, but I used to tell people that I walk out of 50% of the houses that I walk into because either it's not covered or it's not worth it for them, not necessarily for me. If it's worth it for them, then ultimately it's worth it for me, because I'm going to have my large losses. I'm going to have my smaller losses. And it's always the ones that I want to walk out of, Jose, that they're just like, no, come back. I want you to help me. Just please, whatever you want. But yeah, no, there's not
That's
really any
fine.
claim too small. It's mostly too small for the homeowner. Like I said, it's either not covered, I walk in there, or they just maybe have a high deductible. Like earthquake and hurricane deductibles are normally a percentage of your dwelling. So like if you have a I've seen 10% hurricane deductibles that and you have a $100,000 limit or probably more. I'll call it, let's say, $1 million policy because you have $1 million home. I mean, that's going to be quite the deductible. That's $100,000 deductible that if you just have a little bit of roof damage and your roof is only going to cost you maybe about 100 grand or so, you're there's no point. It's 100 grand, yeah, but you have $100,000 deductible that they're going to take off right off the bat.
So it may not be worth it because of the amount of the deductible that they have. What are the
Exactly.
most common reasons insurance companies deny claims?
Long term wear and tear is a big one. Anything that's been happening over time and you've done nothing about it, like those little P trap leaks underneath the sink, those are going to be tough, right? Because a lot of times those have been happening for a long time. Construction defects. So any kind of like faulty construction is what it's called. If
Hmm.
it is as a result of bad workmanship, it's not covered under the insurance policy. Floods are not covered under the insurance policy. You have to have a separate flood insurance. So that is not going to be covered under your normal insurance. Those are probably the most common ones. Is a long-term wear and tear, also called repeated seepage. Any kind of pre-existing damage is the word that they use as well, and also any kind of faulty construction. But with that said, I always tell people that sometimes there's a difference. The most important thing is you have to have if there's a significant event like the floods or like a wind event or like an earthquake, your date of loss is obvious. It happened on this date. Everybody knows there was a state of an emergency. This is what happened. But if it's a leak inside your house and you haven't noticed it, like if you got a supply line leak behind your wall and you just don't see it until it finally shows itself, your date of loss is very, very important. And you have to be aware or beware of when you call the insurance company, they ask you, well, Mr. Morales, what is your date of loss? And you say, well, I don't know. It's behind my wall. It could have been happening for a long time. Oh, is that right, Mr. Morales? So would you say that it happened maybe several months ago? Sure. Now you're shooting yourself in the foot because there's a difference. You don't know when the loss started. You only know when you first noticed it. So what we call first notice, when you actually first notice it, that's your date of loss. So when stepped out of the shower and you notice, hey, there's a leak going on here, that is your date of loss. Because then if you called and notified the insurance company immediately, now your date of loss is just a day or two after you noticed it, and you're not going to have an issue with getting coverage. But if you go ahead and maybe they ask you, oh, it happened several months ago, and now you say that your date of loss was 3 months ago, their first question, they're just going to be like, well, why did it take you so long to file the claim? And they have a reason now to deny your claim.
Is there ever a point where a policyholder or a homeowner could say certain things to the insurance company that would make it so that they don't pay out a claim? Like, for example, the example that you just gave, like about the homeowner saying, oh, it could have happened 3 months ago. It's almost like them putting their own foot in their own mouth, not knowing that that's what they're doing. And if so, can you give us a couple of examples on top of that? Or is that like the only example that you say things that you're not supposed to?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one that we get a lot. I can't think of any more right now off the top of my head. Um, But like you're owed additional living expenses if you have to move out of your house. If you're living with maybe a family member, you can go ahead and you could say that you're living with a family member, but try to make sure you get like a lease agreement as well. And you don't want to just say, well, oh no, my family's just taking me in because of whatever. You're owed that additional living expenses. And if you could call somebody like yourself to put together a lease agreement that, hey, I'm going to get reimbursed for this so I can pay you rent to your family member because you're going to get the money back anyway. That's another one that you could, be careful what you say to the insurance company, because then they're going to be like, oh, well, I don't have to pay your rent because you're not paying any rent because you're with a family member. Well, that may not be the case.
Okay. Now, as it relates to specific disputes, what are things to keep in mind? So, for example, if there was a fire dispute, what are things that people should know about, like a fire claim?
Yeah, fires are complicated. There's a lot that goes into fire. That you just have to make sure that you're documenting everything. If you have a fire claim, I would strongly recommend you call a professional, any public adjuster in your area, especially one that's experienced with fire, because they can get very, very detailed. You're talking every single coverage in your policy, not just the build back, which you may need some architects, you may need an engineer, and you may need some specialists in this, but the build back process for fire, as you know, I'm sure, is going to be very, very in depth. What's even more in depth is going to be your personal property, your contents coverage, because now everything's got fire, everything's got smoke, everything's got soot, all that little black stuff on your walls. It's going to
Hmm.
be all over your personal property. Make sure you have somebody out there who's going to spend the time to take not only a photo of every single piece of lipstick, of every single playing card, of every single piece of personal property, but also document it in an Excel spreadsheet or something that basically you can break down and get the full value of your claim. Because if you leave that to the insurance company, you may get a guy who's just maybe just not feeling it that day, or it's just not normally 99.9% of the time. It's I'm going in there because I'm getting a percentage of what I'm able to recover for you. I can't make anything up because I have to still present it to the insurance company and defend you and argue to the insurance company why it needs to be paid. But ultimately, my interests, or anybody who's looking out for you, our best interest is your interest, to make sure that we're getting everything that you need. So it's funny because people are always like, well, if that's what I'm owed anyway, why am I going to pay, say, 20% to you? The reason is because if you don't hire somebody to be that detailed and in depth and make sure you get all of the build back and all of the personal property and make sure you're staying in the right place, if you don't get all that, you're going to end up with a fraction of the amount than if you didn't have an expert, or just somebody looking out for you. So, yes, am I getting you what you need and taking a percentage off that? Yes, but it's much more than what you would have gotten if you didn't hire somebody who's just looking out for you.
Now, as it relates to fires, are there certain instances where they would just flat out deny it? Like, for example, like some sort of
Arson,
like negligence in some
arson.
sort, and if so, that would be one, the arson.
Yeah, you're going to jail for that. But I'll tell you, after every single fire, they send out a fire expert. They want to know the cause and origin. Every single one. 15 years, Jose, I've never had an arson client. And I've done quite my fair share of fire claims. Just to give you an example, never once.
Basically. Okay, cool. What are things that people should know about floods or water claims?
Well, yeah. So your flood and your water claims, those are two different things. Okay. So your water damage claim, that's going to normally be maybe your sewer line, or maybe your supply line, or maybe an AC leak or something like that that happens inside your home. That's going to be covered under your normal homeowner's insurance policy, and that's going to be a water damage claim. Make sure with any kind of water damage, flood as well, which I'll get into, make sure that you're protecting your property. Okay. Again, that's on the list of the duties after the loss. You have to mitigate and protect your property from getting worse. So, what normally happens after water occurs? Mold, right? So, you have to properly dry out your home as soon as possible. Now, you could dry it out yourself with a bunch of intense towels, and you can go to Home Depot and you could rent some blowers and dehumidifiers and stuff. That's great. At least that's an attempt. Or if it's really, really severe, I would recommend calling a professional, calling a company that goes out there with all their machines. Maybe they have to take out some baseboards for a flood. They've got to do flood cuts, and they do a proper dry out internally, inside of your walls and everything, to make sure that there's no mold that occurs. Because if you've got kids or you've got elderly living in your house, you don't know what could happen behind those walls. So I would recommend, with water damage, and this is flood included, call a professional to do a proper dry out. It is paid for by the insurance company because you are following the duties after the loss. Call a company and then do a mold test. Check to see if there's any kind of mold behind the walls or anything like that, and then you present the claim. It could be very uncomfortable, right? Living in a house with flood cuts. But if you have to move out, the insurance company pays for that as well. But I would still recommend it because although you may be uncomfortable for a few weeks or maybe a month or two, at least your house will be dried out. What is gutted will be gutted out already, and then you just call the contracting company once you get paid, and you just build everything back.
Or what if you're not in a position financially where you can actually afford to call one of these companies? Do these companies work on a um, basis where they can just get paid once the insurance company reimburses them, or how would that work?
Normally they get paid directly by the insurance company.
Okay. So basically,
They're almost like the like for a public adjuster, we get paid by you. We get paid by the client once you get paid. But a lot of times the mitigation company will get a check directly sent to them for their services.
got it. Okay.
Or or it'll be included in the claim payment and then you have to pay them after the claim comes in.
Cool. So let's talk about flood. I know that you mentioned obviously you have to have a separate insurance policy for that. Assuming that they have flood policy, what are the things that people should know about flood claims?
It's a little bit more complicated in regards to sort of what they pay for. If you do have a flood in your house, again, make sure you document it. Um, don't clean. I would recommend do not clean the water lines because if you go and you start cleaning all the water lines before the insurance company goes to see it and they don't see any flood lines, it's going to make your life a lot harder. I would still call a mitigation company because the flood insurance are a little bit more finicky with what they're paying for. For example, with a water damage claim, if you have water damage to your lower cabinets, and because you have all matching cabinets, normally the insurance company won't argue and they'll pay for all of your cabinets because they owe to put you back to pre-loss conditions, which is everything was matching before. As opposed to flood, normally really only pays for what the water touches. So they're only going to pay for your lower cabinets and they're not going to pay for your upper cabinets. They're only going to pay for the baseboard and maybe a foot up of the flood cut. They're not going to pay for the rest of the wall. They may pay to paint it, but they may not pay to texture it. So they're a little bit more finicky. If you have a house, I'm in Florida right now, and we have the houses on the coast that they're up on stilts. Normally, if you have living space underneath there, you should know that your flood insurance is not going to cover the bathroom and the bedroom and all the beautiful stuff you have down there because that is supposed to be up over, I believe, about 12 or 13 feet. So anything that's there, guess what? Get ready. It's not going to be covered because obviously you live in a high risk flood zone. The reason why your house is up there. So there's a little bit more finicky as to what is paid for, and it could be a tough battle.
That's great. And by flood, we mean like obviously like water exits the ocean, also like excess rain. I would imagine because we just had that in California, which is we
Yeah.
didn't have that for a really long time, at least where I'm from. Okay, great. And then what about wind? Anything that people should know about wind damage, and what does wind include? Is that like hurricanes, tornadoes?
Yeah, it's hurricanes, tornadoes, any bad storm. Like even I know some of the storms that we had in California recently. I know there was a couple days there where the wind was excess of 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. When you got gusts like that, if you have a shingled house, a lot of times the
Hmm.
shingles will start lifting. If they lift to a point where they crease, where they form a crease, or they get lifted and they break, well, you're owed for those repairs to at least make a repair to the roof. If you've got a tile roof and those tiles start lifting up, that's going to be covered. And then again, depending on the age of your roof, if your roof is unrepairable because it's so old, if the insurance company agrees to just pay for a small portion of it, chances are they may be on the hook for the entire roof. Flying debris is a big one. You never know where it could just nick and dink the side of your house and the stucco. You got to keep a lookout for all that stuff. And that's pretty much it with wind damage. Make sure that you have other structures coverage. So, like, you have to remember you have coverage A is your dwelling, and coverage B is your other structures. Your dwelling is your house. Okay. Other structures is anything that's on the property that's not attached to your house. So make sure you have other structures coverage if you do have a shed or a play set or anything like that.
Yeah. What about earthquakes? Things to know, things not to know.
Similar to hurricane, where you've got a percentage of the deductible. So the deductible normally is going to be much higher. You have to make sure that you have the earthquake coverage. A lot of times, people like hurricane, they may not include it in their policy. I know some insurances like State Farm, at least with hurricane, they'll have a separate they'll have separate coverages just for a hurricane. So be careful for that with earthquake as well, just because it's such a unique event, unique occurrence. They have separate deductibles and sometimes they have just separate coverages in just in total. They're just completely separate coverages. So you just be aware of that to make sure. It's a good question to ask your agent, making sure that you've got the proper coverage for that.
Yeah. Is there ever a time where you look at a claim and you're just like, look, I don't think I'll be able to get you more than this? Or is there ever a time where you think that you're going to get them X amount of dollars and the claim comes back very similar to what they already have? And what happens in those instances?
Doesn't happen very often. I'm usually able to sort of detect right off the bat when I get an estimate if it was underpaid or not. You could just see, but like for instance, we just signed a claim out in Sacramento
Yeah.
where it was a warehouse and they paid out $180,000 or so. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, I told the client, I said, look, if I can't get you anything more, you don't have to pay me anything. And he said, okay, fine. I said, but I'm pretty sure if they paid you 180,000, that means they probably owe you 300. So when we went out to inspect the property, their square footage is just off. It was just off. It just wasn't right. It was like a 13,000 square foot warehouse,
Hmm.
and we had about 6,000 square feet of damage, and they only wrote up for about 1,250 or something like that. Now I could see why they did it because that's where the significant portion of damage was, but there was a ton of just black soot that you can see was spread across about 6,000 square feet or so. So when we went in there, said, okay, now we could include all of this. They didn't even include to repaint the entire interior, and it's two colors that this warehouse had, which is more money. So we're going to include all that as well. They're not including to service the motors of the garage door openers, which there's 6 of them. That they all have to be serviced, and then also the it was an open ceiling, so you've got all the rafters, you've got all the 2x4s, 2x10s, and you've got the wood sheathing that they only paid for the 1,250 square feet, where I've got 6,000. They're missing 5,000 square feet or so of all this wood sheathing and stuff like that. So it's like I told them, we're probably gonna double it. If not double, we're gonna get a significant amount more just because they didn't write up what they could. Another thing, Jose,
Yeah.
is a lot of times these adjusters that go out, they're not bad guys, right? They're trying to get you whatever they can. This is the insurance company adjusters. The problem is that the insurance company themselves, they have guidelines that they go by. We're not going to paint. We're not going to pay for 2 coats. We're going to pay for 1. We're not going to replace that. We're going to detach and reset that. We're going to need more documentation for this before we pay for that. So they go out there, they write everything. And if any of your audience, they'll know that their conversation with the field adjuster was just fantastic. And he was so nice. And I think this is going to go well. And it might go well. But when they submit the report to the insurance company will look at the person's estimate and they'll just be like, yeah, we're not paying for that. We can't pay for that. This is not covered. That's not covered. And what you thought was going to come back great, you get the mail, a few weeks later, and it's nowhere near what you needed. And it's my job to present to the insurance company, hey, I understand you have your guidelines, but your insurance policy specifically states that you are required to put this person back to the way they were before the loss occurred. That's plain and simple. And you're not doing so by going by your little guidelines. So here's what you need to pay, and here's the evidence to back it up. And then that's how we do it.
Do insurance adjusters ever get compensated based on paying out less? Like, does that exist at all?
No, they actually get compensated based on paying out more, to be honest. That's why those field adjusters, they're trying to write up whatever they can. Because you think about it, if they write, it's going to take them more. Instead of getting paid per hour, they're getting paid by how much they write up because it takes more time. So a $50,000 estimate to write up, to photograph, to measure, and then to put in the system, it's not going to take as long as, say, a $500,000 estimate. So they are looking to write up more. It's just that ultimately it's not up to them. It's up to the insurance company in-house on how much they want to pay. The incentives that I've heard about, okay, this is just hearsay because I've never been an insurance agent. And I don't want to talk bad about insurance agents, but I do hear that insurance agents, they do get audited on how many claims are filed in their offices, So the insurance agents are incentivized to not have their clients that they sell the insurance to file claims. So be careful. Everybody says they want to call their agent. Let's file the claim with the agent. Let me see what my agent says. Normally, what I've seen is the insurance agent will subconsciously, I'm not saying they do it on purpose, subconsciously, they may deter you to be like, oh, you don't want to file a claim because it's not worth it. And it may not be worth it, but you want to get at least several different opinions.
Yeah. Now, is it ever too late? Like, it sounds like you're connecting with people sometimes after they already receive a check. At what point is it too late? Like a month later, a year later?
There's usually a limit depending on the state. Some limits allow 1 year. Some states some limits. Some states have a 1 year limit. Some states have 2 or 3 year limits. But the policy, again, your duties after the loss is to notify the insurance company as soon as possible. If you're filing a claim within that year time frame and you're filing it in date 364, guess what? Probably going to deny that claim.
How much work or how many hours would you say goes into like a properly presentable claim to the insurance company, just so that like our viewers can kind of like, because it sounds like a lot of work, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a lot of work on the background because just on the front end, the most important part is the documentating part in the front end, making sure that you're presenting the claim the way it's supposed to. It's what we call a scope of loss. So I'm going to
Mhm.
go in, I'm going to go in with my little gadgets. I'm going to have moisture detectors. I'm going to have an infrared gun. I'm going to have my laser to make sure I get the proper distance. I'm going to go in there and spend as much time, and then I'm going to photograph the crap out of it. I'm going to make sure that I have enough documentation that when I go home, I can now put my estimate together. So depending on the size of the loss, you're talking maybe an hour or two when you're out there really inspecting the loss, another hour or two to put your report together. And then the follow up process begins, right? We follow up at Elite Resolutions every 7 days. It's like clockwork. We have a calendar. Even through all our claims, we make sure that every 7 days, no matter what, the insurance company knows that we are going to reach out to them to find out what's going on. And what we do is we make sure that we try to present everything up front. Here's the estimate. Here's the photos. Here's the invoices. Here's a copy of the policy. Here's everything you need to try to pay this claim, please. And there shouldn't be anything else. Now they'll go and inspect the property, which is another hour or two because the insurance company is going to do the same thing that we're doing, which is presenting the claim as well. And then we're just going to sort of battle it out from there. So the scope of loss in the initial inspection, meeting the insurance company, and then the follow up process. I don't know,
Yeah.
about 10 or 12 hours.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot more than 10 to 12 hours just by kind of listening to all this. Like, what would you say, like, is like one big success story that you guys have had where maybe like somebody's only receiving like a small claim and you guys are able to get them something dramatically different?
There's so many, Jose. It's like hard to even. I mean, I've had claims that were denied and zero was paid out where we settled for $1.4 million. I mean, associations, right? Associations, they get they get screwed a lot because associations are technically they are the named insureds, and that
Mhm.
president of the association is normally signing my contract for me to represent them, and they don't know anything about insurance. They're just a homeowner. They're just volunteering to take care of this association, and they get screwed a lot because those are such large payments. The insurance company is trying to do whatever they can to not make that $1.4 million payment. And those are the few that I've had. We had a severe flood. Speaking of flood, it was an association, a fairly large association with 63 units, 13 buildings. Every single unit it was all townhome apartments in a way, and every single unit was inundated with flood. They had great flood insurance. I was over there the next day. I mean, it was very, very intense. Yeah, that 12 hours, it was more like 12 days nonstop every single day because we had to document. It's basically I signed 63 claims in one day, and we had to document all 63 claims. We had to flood cut all 63 homes. We had to do a lot there, and ultimately, long story short, yeah, we settled for about $2.1 million, and we knocked that one out of the park, and that was great because you're talking about lower to middle class neighborhood. I would say middle class, lower class, somewhere right there in the middle. Just really, really nice people, a Hispanic community, and we were able to really take care of them. It ended up it was a fight, it was a battle, but we ended up doing pretty well for them.
Yeah. Here's the last question I wanted to ask you. So obviously, you guys aren't the only public adjuster firm out there. Like, if I was looking for somebody that was really going to look out for my best interest, what would be part of that vetting process that I should be going through? Or if I work with any public adjusting firm, am I going to get the same results?
Unfortunately, I would love to tell you that you would always get the same results, but that's not true. Now, I train public adjusters and we help public adjusting firms launch and stuff like that throughout the country. Um, what is it? I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me to give any kind of advice on that. I mean, you could go to Google. Google reviews are going to be very important. I would probably not sign up with the first public adjuster that goes to your house. I would ask for some references as well. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I can tell you, in 15 years, I've been asked probably in one hand. I could count how many times I've been asked for references. But I would probably recommend that some past clients, um, and just I mean, honestly, Jose, I mean, I don't know. Unless you walk into their offices and you find out what their SOPs are and everything, it's going to be really hard to tell whether they're going to do a good job or not. But again, the good part about what we do is there's no out of pocket expenses for what we do. Like everything is contingency based. So we are just try to look at it. We are incentivized to do the best job possible. And any businessman in their right mind that obviously, we grow our businesses through referrals, we're going to do the best job possible. But it's going to be hard to tell. I would just say get a feel for it, talk to 2 or 3 public adjusters in the area and make the wisest decision possible.
Does number of claims filed matter at all? Like I know in our business, like obviously if somebody has only been a real estate agent for a year versus somebody that's or has maybe only sold 10 properties in their career versus somebody who sold 750 or 1,000 properties. I know that's a metric. Is that something that is like would be a common question at all to maybe ask like, hey, how many claims specifically uh, to fires have you filed? And also like, is there like a certain specialty as well too that you should look for, like meaning certain adjusting firms specialize more in fire, certain ones specialize more in floods, anything there?
That's great points that you brought up, Jose. Yeah, for sure. Number of claims filed is a big one. That's a huge one. You don't want to get some kind of new rookie adjuster because it may not go well. So definitely experience matters. Absolutely, 100%. And yes, there are we don't have a specialty. We definitely we handle pretty much everything. We've got a lot of experienced adjusters on staff, but I know I know a public adjuster in particular in Illinois. They pretty much only do fires. I know a particular public adjuster in Arizona area. This guy only handles multi-million dollar projects. So yes, I mean it's a good question to ask, depending on the kind of claim that you have, whether or not that's something they specialize in. But what they tell you is probably going to be, of course, right? Of course they specialize in. But
How do you
yeah, I mean,
verify
experience is good.
any of this? But how do you verify any of this? Because I know in our industry, like real estate agents will be like, well, I'm top 1% in my company, but there's only 3 agents there, so it's not very hard to be top 3%. Like, is there a way to verify any of this information?
Not really. Not really. I mean, the best you can do is you can go to the local, to the Department of Insurance, and you could at least just confirm that they're licensed. And you could confirm that if they told you they have 10 years of experience, you can see when their license was issued. But other than that, it's going to be tough to any kind of awards or anything like that. I wish that'd be great. But no, we don't have anything like that.
I love it. Cool. And if somebody liked the interview and maybe not right now, but maybe they know somebody going through something like this, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can hear see everything about our firm on eliteresolutions.com. But if you really want to be educated and you want to learn a little bit, definitely go on my YouTube channel. It's the Commercial Claims Show. And I mean, we've got 3 years of content where every single Wednesday we come out with a new video. And it's a great way. It's intended for public adjusters to help them. But I'll tell you what, every video there could be transcribed. If you're handling the claim yourself, all the things that you have to do. I go through all the duties after the loss. I go through all the ways of documenting, the ways of estimating, the ways of scoping, the ways of photographing, how often you should follow up. A lot of our SOPs that we have in-house, I have free on there on the YouTube channel, and it could really help a homeowner out, sort of get them through the insurance claims process, which could be a pretty frustrating process. And that channel, I know I've had clients that tell me like, hey, thank you because I thought that I was alone here. I thought that this was only happening to me, but apparently this is something that happens all the time. And unfortunately, it is. The insurance company is in the business of saving money, like anybody, like any other business, I would say. And you have to try to make sure you use the proper techniques and tactics. And in the insurance and in the YouTube channel, we go through a lot of that. And we have the commercialclaimsadvocate.com. There's all kind of educational stuff. That's if you want to become more of a public adjuster. But the YouTube page is a really good source of knowledge and education on the insurance claims process.
I love it. I love it. Great. So I wanted to say thank you, Vince, obviously, for coming on the show. This is a topic that I've never covered on the show, but it's something that I had a friend who had a fire, and he said he hired a public adjusting firm, and that he got a lot more than what he thought he would have gotten had he done it by himself. So I'm definitely a believer in this. For our viewers out there, I just want to say thank you for taking the time. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will be helpful to somebody, make sure to hit that share button. Vince, once again, maybe we can do one on pre-loss exclusions in the future or something different. But I appreciate your time. And to our viewers, thank you again. And until next time.